do they have genealogies in the Quran or in the Hadiths or anything like that?
No.
Really?
No, absolutely not. Because genealogies are an artifact of written literature.
Hmm.
No one remembers that kind of thing over 1,000 years of oral history. Which is again, it's because the Bible is a written work, therefore it has genealogies. And so, if you're memorizing a story, you can memorize. Yeah, and then when Noah got off the ark, his son, he built a vineyard and got drunk, and then Shem, Ham, and Japheth. But it's like, to memorize the genealogies, I might be able to do it. But is the next person I tell? So that's going to fall apart real quickly. So because the Quran is an oral document to start with, the Hadith is oral, you don't get that kind of thing.
So how do they trace back to Ishmael?
Yeah, so that is the genealogies that you'd have in the Arab society, right? You'd have it in your name. So
got it.
So I would be, so in Arab culture, I'd be James ibn Richard ibn Leslie ibn Charles ibn right. So son of. Right? So it gets put in your family name. So you do have that kind of genealogy, but not in the sort of scientific. All right, and he was 48 years old when he fathered this person, and he was this old when he fathered this person, right? So it's not that there's no trace of that, but it's all in the sort of like tribe names.
Got it. And so, does Mohamed trace his lineage back to Ishmael and Abraham?
So, yes, there is sort of a general sense of that in Arab culture at the time, but it's not as big of a deal in Muhammad's time that it becomes later. So, for example, right, the one thing everybody knows about Islam is that they don't believe it was Isaac that was sacrificed; it was Ishmael.
Right.
But that is not in the Quran. That is not in the Hadith.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, and then Al-Tabari, the sort of first big Muslim historian, chronicles that he makes a chronicle of people saying it both ways, right? So Al-Tabari says, yeah, there's 5 people that say it's Ishmael for this reason. These 5 people say it was Isaac, and based on the internal logic of the Quran, Isaac makes more sense.
Interesting. And when was this written? When did Al-Tabari document that?
930
Oh, wow.
AD. So that's 300 years after Muhammad.
Okay.
So it's become a bigger deal over time to the point that everybody just kind of assumes it. But even in Muslim scholarly circles today, they actually will admit we don't know which son Abraham was going to sacrifice.
Got it. So because that's a big deal now, right? Like you're saying, it became a bigger deal, and it's a big deal now. But in the early years, like when Muhammad went and wiped out or conquered those 3 tribes you mentioned, and one of them or 2 of them were Jewish, if I'm remembering it correctly, it wasn't because they saw themselves as descendants of Ishmael and they're destroying the descendants of, shoot, it's slipping my mind right now. Isaac. Is it Isaac?
Yeah.
Okay. They weren't, it wasn't for those reasons.
No.
Whereas now we would be like, oh, or we could read into the past and be like, oh, it's because one saw themselves as descendants of Ishmael and the other of Isaac.
Right.
So they didn't see that.
No, not really. In fact, the Quran clearly speaks of Isaac as a prophet. So there's not. So Muhammad puts himself in the line of the Jewish prophets, right? He kind of connects himself to that legacy, and he connects himself to Ishmael.
Was Ishmael a prophet as well?
In Islam?
Yeah.
Yes.
And Abraham?
Yes.
Huh. Then what? I mean, did the prophets, and this will go into my next one was going to be like, what did they do with Jesus? But did the prophets, because Isaac and Ishmael lived at the same time, right? And hey, so did Abraham. So there was 3 prophets alive on the earth in one family at the same time.
Yeah.
And one prophet went to, I mean, what did the prophets do from a Islamic perspective?
So this becomes this becomes sort of interesting, because essentially Mohammed kind of reads back his own struggle kind of on everyone else as well. So Abraham especially, right? So he sees the Quran sees Abraham as this person struggling for monotheism against polytheism, basically. And so, it relates some of the Bible stories of the prophets and will, change others. Honestly, not a lot of the time it doesn't come from the Quran intentionally coming with an agenda necessarily, but maybe because of these stories kind of like picked up traceably through Jewish narrations, which come later.
And then what was the problem? The problem was that they didn't use the right word for God, because like the Jews, they were monotheists, right? And so what was the problem with the existing monotheistic faith?
So basically, the argument the Quran makes is that people have added all sorts of innovation to the religion over time. So firstly, the problem that he's going to allege is that the Jews do not believe in Jesus as a prophet, and that's a problem.
Oh, and the Muslims do.
Yeah. And then part 2 problem, you don't acknowledge Muhammad as a prophet either. So, if you're truly God's people, you have to acknowledge God's true prophet. And if you don't, it's because you're a hypocrite and don't really know God.
Wow. Okay. So if you don't accept their prophets, you could be monotheistic, but you're off the right path per se. Right.
Okay. Which again, it's kind of the same standard we would have for the Jews at the time of Jesus who rejects him as a Messiah, right? It's
for sure.